Oh, sorry about that. We had a little feedback. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Super Soldier Talk. Guess what? We finally have Eve Lorgen here. Eve, I feel like I'm in the presence of royalty here. Go ahead and mute yourself because
Super
you've
Soldier
been doing
Talk.
this. You've been
Guess
doing
what?
Uh-oh.
Finally have Eve
All right.
Lorgen here.
Feedback.
Was
Yeah, maybe lower. I'm going to lower my.
browser. I think it was my other browser. Let's hope we're fine.
Oh, was that me? Maybe it's me. Hold on. Nope.
I think it was mine. I had two browsers on that were
Okay.
open. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do it again. Welcome everybody to the show. My name is James Rink, and I'm the host of Super Soldier Talk. I am a super soldier and was used in these milab abduction experiences, served 330 years off-world through various clone bodies, and I live to talk about it. So, but today was not about me. Today is about Eve. So Eve's been doing this since when? When did you start doing your regression work?
Heavens. Oh, probably the 1990s. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what got you into specialize in the milab phenomena, which stands for what, Eve?
Well, of course, the driving force is always personal experience. So in my family line, we had what I found out later was what Bud Hopkins was talking about in the early days with classic alien abduction kinds of experiences. And as I read more, I'm like, oh my gosh, this happened to me. And I had this whole idea that there was something good about it and that they were like benevolent ETs, but I couldn't remember. But there was all this trauma. So it was like this incongruent inner conflict going on with wanting to believe that they're these benevolent beings that we have contact with, and we're a contactee or a star person or whatever. But as I learned more and discovered in my own experience, as well as many others, that it wasn't necessarily these benevolent beings interacting with me in my experience. So I learned more about not only the abductions, but the military component. And some of that was actually through not just personal experience, but as I delved more into, let's say, doing a support group I think it was 96 when I started right after Dr. Karla Turner passed away. And me and James Bartley started it, and me and another colleague who I'd gone to graduate school with. So we started a support group in San Diego County and worked with Barbara Bartholic in correspondence with a lot of the things that were coming up, not only personally, but in the group and with what she learned through Dr. Karla Turner's for her death and her family's experiences, and then the books with the Ted Rice Masquerade of Angels. So that was really the launching point. But really what happened, it was kind of interesting. As I started the group and we were meeting maybe once a month, I think, and then talking with a lot of back really before we had a lot of the internet, but we still did a lot of phone calls and physical visits. Then several people in my group at the same time were going through these like dramatic love obsession kinds of things. But it was really what Barbara Bartholic knew was this, she called it the alien engineered drama of the love obsession. So some kind of alien engineered relationship obsession that was basically manipulating us in such a way that we were having these experiences where you're basically falling in love or having some kind of dramatic love obsession or manipulation in a relationship. Some maybe it as a result of doing further investigations with, quote, alien abductions, and that whole field really exploded. It started with, in the old days, it was just the UFO phenomena and the craft, and then maybe the abductions. Then it really expanded into the whole paranormal and interdimensional, and also crop circles and the truther movement and spirituality. And then it really blossomed into many different areas of interest, including like the Montauk Project. So I was on kind of the early phase of discovering some of the early Montauk Project people who were super soldiers. And that was the Andy Parrow interview I did in 1998. And I met Preston Nichols back in Philadelphia and met with people up in Long Island. So I had learned before a lot of the super soldier stuff was really coming out. It was only like Duncan Cameron and Al Bielek and some of the Montauk people, and then the Fritz Springmeier Illuminati people, but they seemed to have a different spin on the whole phenomena. So there was a lot of black and white thinking in the early days. It was either, oh, it's all MK Ultra, ritual abuse, this or that, and then there's no UFOs and it's all bullshit, but it's not the case. There really is some alien ET experiences that may be just that. And then there's others that are definitely military with aliens. And then there's some that are military pretending to be aliens. And then there's some aliens pretending to be military and human. So really, there's a whole lot going on through these interactions that I think have been going on for a long time. But I do think that since a certain era in our history, maybe since, I don't know, the Eisenhower or the Roswell era, where there's many more people being abducted by aliens. And then there were groups of people supposedly who the military had lists that they knew that this was going on. It was some kind of agreement. And so I think people in the secret government, if you want to call it that, the military, were following these people who were having the classic alien abduction or alien visitation, or channelers. Actually, they would follow them and sometimes interrogate them in abductions. And then sometimes the interrogation would happen in the what I call the dreamscape or the astral interrogations, with people who are skilled at like remote influencing and remote viewing even back then. So as part of all that, though, let me kind of get back on track, that what I felt that some of this alien engineered love obsession thing could have, I felt like there was basically four reasons why they'd be doing this. And of course, Barbara Bartholic was the one who really helped me understand clearly the more alien engineered aspect. And she felt a lot of this was point blank emotional energy harvesting, or the loosh energy, the sexual energy, and the life force energy of the energy emotions. And then the other reason, where if the aliens are indeed putting people together to have children, then that would be a desired eugenic type of long-term project of bloodline. And then for the ones who were milabs, sometimes they were utilized for their ability to work together as a male-female team who worked together very well to do certain operations. And because of their connection, and sometimes it was tantric, and many different components that might define what a good pair would be, then they would be utilized together in the projects. So if these people who, let's say they were both milabs in a project and they were like in different parts of the country, then they would maybe meet and then they would have this like deja vu, or you would have flashbacks. They're like, I know this person. I think, I've dreamed about them. And they would actually realize, oh, they've been used in operations together because they're both in some kind of weird project. And that would catalyze a strong attraction. So that was another common thing that would happen, we would discover later. And sometimes this would be two abductees who may or may not be from like the same town, that were taken and bonded together, like in the Ted Rice case, for example. The two abductees as teenagers were bonded together, and they were like from the same town. So sometimes it's something like that, where they're utilizing them for a harvesting or some kind of hybrid thing. And then in the Love Bite, there was a case, let's see, I don't remember the name of it. You'll have to look in the Love Bite. But it was 3 individuals that were taken, and 2 were bonded to each other, but they weren't friend-girlfriend. They were like, yeah, and they'll do this to married couples where it's to somebody else, you know what I mean? It can create like affairs. So, but in that couple's case, they were taken, they discovered they were from the same town, the same area where I believe group abductions take place. And then they find out later, if they both remember or meet each other and they live across the country in different places, they're from that test group of that group that was taken from the same town like 20 something years ago or whatever it was. So there's different, I think, reasons why they may put people together and take them. So I think that was about the 4 main reasons, more or less. And then some of the twin flame thing, which is very common. So I get a lot of reports of people who think, oh, I think I've met my twin flame, and it's this person, but I never really met them like in person, but I'm meeting them in my dreams or having these astral unions. And then so that kind of phenomena happens where there is another, what I call third-party entity, some interdimensional being that is actually manipulating the connections on an astral realm or even physical, but it's not necessarily with the conscious control of either party. So, and that could create a lot of problems because I don't know if I'm going too fast, but I get so many of these reports, and the people aren't necessarily like the classic milab or somebody who's had alien abductions all their life, but they get caught in these like weird twin flame things, but they know there's an other dimensional entity that's non-human, maybe higher intelligence, that's manipulating the whole thing, creating fantastic dramas and schemes in the two people's lives or just astrally, but it's very, very real. And I think that's a dangerous situation because I think the ones who are doing this, these high level beings, they're very vampiristic. So they can create a lot of problems for the people down the road, you know? So I'll just stop there because I'm not sure where you might want to branch
What
into.
is the definition of a milab?
Oh, yeah. And I think in the early days, this was probably Dr. Helmut Lammer might have created this in conjunction with maybe Dr. Karla Turner and some of the early researchers who were investigating like alien abductees is what they called them. And I think Bud Hopkins started that term. But then, they also had this military component where the military would take them sometimes after or be working in conjunction with aliens or sometimes independently. And so they made it as a contraction between the word military and abduction to make it a military abduction. But really, it's some alien component and some military component. And that's how I understand it. But many people have taken that word to make it like, they're these my labs, like a laboratory. But it's not necessarily what it means. It's just a word for a type of experience that contains a military human component and an alien ET component. So if that makes sense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did not read this. I'm going to introduce you at this moment. So Eve Lorgen is a 25-year dedicated counselor and hypnotherapy professional, and she is in the anomalous. What is it? Anomalous trauma researcher. What is that?
Anomalous trauma really is something unusual out of the range of human experience. And that was the term that I decided to use so that the psychological circles wouldn't feel it's all weird. And because people just throw it out. If you say alien, you say UFO, you say ET, they just throw you out and call it crazy. And they don't give it credit. So that's why. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of that's changing now. So, all right. Her two books, The Love Bite Alien Interface in Human Love Relationships and The Dark Side of Cupid Love Affairs, The Supernatural and Energy Vampirism, reveal compelling case histories of alien abductees and experiencers of the anomalous relationship setups and interdimensional interferences. She began her pioneering work with alien abductees, milabs, and mind control victims while earning her master's degree in counseling psychology in 1992. She also holds a BS in biochemistry and worked in the biotechnology industry for 7 years. Other studies include Taoist Oriental Medicine, meditation, and lucid dreaming practices, Buddhism, biblical and Gnostic studies, and she's now a Christian. She was a close associate of the late Barbara Bartholic and Dr. Karla Turner. So her websites are Eve Lorgen, alienlovebite.com, and it's also you can get some books there. Thank you, Eve, for coming on here today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a while. But I would say this experience, though, actually compels many to have a cross multiplicitous. I can't say the word, but studying many different areas of research is a way to try to understand what's happening. So it's not just science, but it might be spirituality and mind control and ritual abuse and Illuminati and science and quantum and this and that and it seems like we have to learn on many different perspectives to kind of get a handle on what's going on. Yeah.
So as I was preparing the artwork for the show today, this happened this morning.
Oh yeah, you showed that to me.
I was like wondering. I wonder what. So they did. I got a scoop mark. I talked to Kimberly. I don't remember. But Kimberly says I was taken on a ship, and I was put on the table, and I broke out of my trance and fell on the floor, and somebody kicked me. But
Oh gosh.
take what you want from that one. So I think there is something going on here with Eve and her work. It seems like whatever work that you're working in is connected to me. So, or really this whole community in general, because as I've discussed on the show over the years, we've graduated from the term MyLab and now call it the Secret Space Program, because
Yes.
we found out that these MyLab abductees weren't just taken for a few hours to be interrogated after alien contacts.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They were taken for 20-year and backs, and sometimes numerous 20 and backs.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on here. So let's see here. You want to talk about what happened recently with in Asheville and the floods? Because
It's
go ahead.
well, luckily I didn't have any major damage to my home, but I saw a lot of it driving, and a lot of the trees. It's actually very. I think a lot of people out here in general have PTSD about it, because it's really. It got me. I have to say, when the power goes out and you don't know if you're going to get water and don't know if you could travel, and I mean, I didn't have internet for a month, and I finally had to buy a Starlink because there was no communication. So we couldn't get anything repaired. We couldn't make calls. We couldn't do anything. And everybody was just kind of scrambling around like in duress and couldn't get help. So but now, it's a little bit better, but there's still people living in tents out in the freezing weather and have lost their homes and lost their lives, and there's a lot missing, thousands. So they're not really telling the whole truth. And I think within the first week or two, I started figuring out that they weren't telling the truth on like the radio, because all we had was like the local radio to hear what was going on, because everything else wasn't working. And then I found out through a friend who did a rescue mission in Burnsville, what happened with their group and another group that were helping, and had a run-in with FEMA and kicked them out, I guess, and found out that, they were trying to block, people from getting help, and they were kind of sabotaging, and it was a lot worse than what they were saying, and it was extremely traumatic. I'm just hearing about it. It was really, really traumatic. So, well, all I have to say is I'm still traumatized, because, we're always like prepping, because I know now, like, I could have prepped better. I had a broken generator, but the generator helped to get water. But after it broke, it was like, I don't know how long this is going to go on. And we really don't know, because there was nothing you could do, So anyway, that's all I want to talk about that, and just hope it doesn't happen again, and be better prepared next time. And but I did get to meet my neighbors and have some really nice discussions and fun things too. Like, you meet people and you kind of trauma bond, I guess, So, yeah.
All right. Wow. You're a survivor. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. Okay. Can you tell us? So many questions here. How about this? So we have this field of SRA, the satanic ritual abuse. And in that field, my experience with some of the people, the researchers, is they don't want to look at the whole MyLab phenomenon, because we find that many MyLab victims, almost, I would say maybe secret space program victims, have been subjected to SRA.
Yes.
So why do you think there's so much fear even in that own community? Because we're trying to expose, that what is Satan? It's darkness. It's a consciousness that keeps us under fear and under selfishness, egos, and so and the whole goal is to bring about truth to the planet. I mean, that's not what Jesus Christ taught. So let's bring about the
In fact, I learned. Yeah, I mean, I ran into that when I met Arizona Wilder years ago and had conversations with her and her partner. And I learned early, like, okay, yeah, actually, way back when in my college, I met a ritual abuse, what do they call it? Well, MPD, DID, who was still operating in unhealed altars, but knew a lot about what was going on, even linking in with some of the alien thing. But there tended to be a big split between, that's not my experience or whatever. But now, after working with people because of the dissociative identity disorder in many of the super soldiers in milabs, because they utilize alters that are programmed and trained for a particular capability. They have to do early trauma to create the dissociative alter personality splits, as they call them. So in the early childhood, a lot of that is done, especially if there's a military application where they take them to a base. They're preconditioned, usually before age 6, to have a split in their personality through a severe trauma. So what I'm finding, though, is that many of the splits might have happened before that in their family system. So even in my questionnaire, I have questions relating: is there a connection in your family line of, alphabet soup agencies, occult secret societies, or, ritual cult abuse, that usually that there's a hidden foundation that got them. I think there's a spiritual permission in terms of an ancestral curse or ownership over us with respect to certain secret societies. And then the aliens are laying claim to us either through these bloodlines or with these bloodlines, or maybe independent of them, for many who have had this kind of thing in their background. So really what I do in my questionnaire is, like, I'm assessing for, if I'm seeing the narcissistic abuse family system, if I'm seeing dissociation, or I'm seeing the alphabet agency, aerospace, my lab, the ghosts, the psychic abilities. I could tell, okay, they're probably in a family system, but they may not know where the connection came from. So I think in the early days, they didn't even consider that this was part of the deal, but now we know that it is. So I think it's important for people to assess for this without fear. And it's really the Satan word. And so a lot of times we call it cult abuse or ritual abuse, but that is actually very specific in terms of trauma splitting. So for example, you can have, I get geeked out because I like the psychology part of it. But in, let's say, a family system where you have narcissistic abuse, that's very common now, sexual abuse, alcoholism, some kind of abuse where they create trauma of, sometimes it's like a sexual abuse, severe physical pain, or irreconcilable emotional or moral conflict between age 0 and 6, more or less, that can create the dissociative split. So in some family systems, that happens just from the abuse. But in ritual abuse and MK Ultra, MyLab, even alien abduction, they're going to do a purpose in a specific way and link in programming or some kind of spiritual principality or demon or power that has control over them and their altar or their whole, their life, that is done for a specific purpose. And it's an ancient knowledge that these families, actually, I learned that they've been doing this for thousands of years. It's just that now we have many applications in different sectors of society and technology to do it maybe more easily. So I think they're just doing it en masse now.
What are some signs that you were involved in these programs, either SRA or alien abduction, milabs?
Well, a sign that if someone is involved, I would say, well, this is what I learned also from Arizona Wilder and the Fritz Springmeier, the Cisco Wheeler people, and many others. High intelligence, multi-generational sexual abuse, and ease of dissociation, like they just dissociate better. There's like the 3 qualities: dissociation, high intelligence, psychic ability, and there's usually multi-generational sexual abuse in the bloodline, like Kathy Phillips talks about. So those things they actually look for to help make better slaves. So I look for that if there's like sexual abuse or Freemasonry, a high level Freemasonry, or witchcraft, or any of these really high level secret society types of people or family connections, or the aerospace thing with alien abductions in my labs and secret space program. You're going to have, a lot of times you have that. But and there's usually abuse or some military component. But I could see it now. Just when I talk to someone or I have them fill out the thing, I could tell. And most people don't understand the connections, or they have this great resistance to thinking there's a connection there, or like, oh, I've never been, sexually abused, or I've, this not. But you could have this in your family line 4 generations, 7 generations, and then they could lay claim to you and you not even know you have this in your line, and then you get abducted. So sometimes you don't know until this is where you have to do the deep self-inquiry, where it's meditation, prayer, therapy, and then the truth emerges in your experience, sometimes through visions or memories. And then you'll know, like, oh, there was this ancient spirit that was connected, and they were the one that were responsible for some of this. So that's what we're learning in the therapeutic process, that sometimes we find this. Yeah. Like,
You were mentioning earlier about Dr. I'm saying Arizona Wilder. I don't actually, I'm not
yes.
a doctor, but
Yeah,
is she?
he was. Yeah.
She was?
David Icke interviewed her way back when the wasn't the Mother Goddess thing, and it was like
Mother
some
of
long.
Darkness.
Yeah, Mother. Gosh, I remember this from years ago, and I mean, me and James Bartley, we did a lot of conferences and met people, and we had long conversations with these people, but they tended to be, some of them were, I think, were used as plant to create disruption in the community, because they were very quick to judge a lot of the alien abduction experiences and even the milabs as being all satanic ritual abuse. But I won't say it's an all or nothing thing, but I think the dissociation aspect is certainly present. you know but a lot of them are still being used as operatives to create disruptions or to deviate the opinions, especially away from the information about the aliens, because so I'm sure you've seen that too, or the time
Exactly.
travel, the technologies that they're really using. They don't want us to know the specifics and then who's behind them. And I really think they don't want us to have power and sovereignty over what's laying claim to us as ownership, and how to, let's say, if we are a MyLab or somebody in a program, how to have them stop accessing us so that they could no longer utilize us as slaves in these programs. So that's where the rubber meets the road. It's like, what can we do in our therapeutic process and empowerment so that that stops and we regain our sovereignty and integration of any dissociated parts, and we basically cut the curses of the principalities and the demons and the beings who are laying claim to us, which they do. And actually, we know this even with, for example, the sovereignty movement, where they're doing all this, birth certificate thing, and they're figuring out how, with the straw man and all that, that they've laid claim to us. They basically claiming death over us and trading us as bond slaves by the global elite predators. So this has been going on for a long time in many ways, I think.
So my question is Arizona Wilder still alive? Do you know?
I don't know. I haven't heard. Maybe. And I know Fritz Springmeier. I actually met him years ago in Philadelphia at a conference. But a lot of them they're probably, in their senior, 60s by now, and they might be retired. And it seems like people come out, like, if you've been here for like 30 years like me, they have their 15 minutes of fame or their 2 years of fame with a book or a this or a that, and then they disappear, or they no longer tell their story, or some of them have written books and continue to talk. But it's my experience that people tend to get targeted pretty bad for coming out with some of this information. And then you have to go through, how well are you resilient from the targeting and the reprisals and the threats to yourself and others, to, you know, to be able to still tell the truth and be able to perceive things clearly. Because I think they try to re-access and mind control people to be able to make them not remember, things in their experience. They'll want you to remember some things, but not others. And then they'll come and, let's say, abduct you and access you or an altar, and then threaten that altar not to talk once you're doing your therapy, for example. And that actually happened to me. So there's people who
You
know.
are you a love bite?
Oh, I've had, yeah, of course. I mean, that's what motivated me to friggin' write my book, it happened to me. And then I went through a series of, like the reprisals and the targeting and the threats but I learned more and more, to such a degree that I felt that not only trauma recovery, which is, a lot of psychological, trauma work, but a spiritual approach of developing a calm mind. So I actually did a lot of Buddhist meditation practice and a lot of prayer, and then later started doing more specific Christian prayer against curses and specific beings. And that seemed to help unlock some things. And but it takes a long time. This kind of thing is not well known, and we're learning more all the time, So,
Wow. Well, let's talk about that later because I would love to get in contact with Arizona Wilder if we could. All right. So next question. Does Nathan have a message?
oh well, certainly wants to send his regard, and he wanted me to mention. I think it's his understanding of, which is very relevant to the love bite, and some of the what I call programming on some levels of reality, such as the astral plane, where in his experience, he definitely experienced something called the virtual temple complex within the context of being kind of sheep-dipped into I think the group was he called it Project Ibis, but for him, it was a cult called the Joy of Satan, which was kind of a new age spirituality cult thing, but it was actually run by high-level handlers who were probably ritual abuse survivor family members who were actually part of a project to entrap and program people to make them stay within these narratives of what they want them to believe, so they don't really remember the real thing of what's really going on. So I've actually have heard of astral programming and been caught up in even my lab experiences where you're basically taken into another dimensional reality, or what feels like that, and then programmed or communicated with or whatever on that level. So I think that they do program people in dream states, and there's even normals who aren't my labs who've talked about this on independent channels where they were like lucid dreamers, and then they stumbled across some realm in the astral in their lucid dream where they were being told that they can't go there, and saw a bunch of people basically being programmed by these human-looking people with clipboards and basically telling them, you're not supposed to be here. We're going to have to make you forget, and asking them questions like if they had vaccines. And then if they didn't cooperate, they woke up very, very sick and then couldn't lucid dream anymore. So there's like this, remember that movie? What was it called? The Adjustment Bureau. Remember? And it was like a couple, and they kept trying to interfere so that this couple couldn't, have a relationship, basically. So it's kind of like that. There's these interlopers on an astral plane that are manipulating and even programming people. So I've actually noticed that not only the remote influencing, but there's programming on subtle levels of consciousness that as we learn more and more, we start to notice more subtle ways in which there is a type of accessing and manipulation of our energy field and our emotions and our thoughts. So, I don't know if I got off track there, but I just had to say that.
Could you comment about Dr. Karla Turner? Was she murdered? What do you think about that? Well, first of all,
Yeah,
some people may not know who that is.
well, the late Dr. Karla Turner, she had a PhD in, North Texas University literature, I believe. So she's really smart already. And then she was an abductee in her family line, as well as her husband and children, I believe, at the time. And so she wrote about her experiences after learning not only research, but a lot of her hypnotherapy from Barbara Bartholic. So Barbara Bartholic was really good with how she find out detailed information about what was going on. And it seemed to get more, she went through more screen memories than maybe many hypnotherapists who maybe got a surface level memory, but then Barbie was able to get through a lot more detail that suggested a more nefarious kind of operation going on, especially with some of the military stuff and the alien stuff. So anyway, so Karla Turner not only had her own book called Into the Fringe about her personal experiences, but wrote the one called Taken, which was like 5 or more case studies of abductees and milabs, I believe, and their hypnotherapeutic, what they found out. And then the Ted Rice case, Masquerade of Angels, was like the big, man, blow the lid off the whole friggin' field with the masquerade of angels and what happened to him with the cloning and with the love bite and with the aliens and the reptilians, and how the reptilians were like manipulating, his grandmother when they would abduct him and try to make you think and perceive something else, the sexual stuff, everything. And it was such a mind blower that it became a very hot topic and uncomfortable for the people who wanted to believe, well, there's only good ETs, and there's only this and there's only that, and we don't want to talk about that. It was just too negative and too scary. So she basically, I think she was threatened, and Barbie knew more details, but I think it was when Karla Turner's autopsy, there was something in her liver, if I remember correctly. And this was in a written interview in 2008 with Barbara Bartholic and a French researcher. I still have it on my website. But basically, when they did an autopsy of the liver, there was a type of unusual imprintation in the liver that something so specific and so high tech that I think the doctor even commented that there's only like alien technology could do something like this. So it was like they were leaving a calling card, or this is the aliens. We can do anything. And I remember there was a scary thing that Dr. Karla Turner had mentioned, probably in some of her lectures, that she was threatened, not to talk, right? Not to share too much, or we'll just replace you with the clone. We'll kill you and replace you, and nobody will know, that kind of thing. So, and, I guess it was Ted Rice's experience that really opened up this whole cloning switching out procedure, which is just like, it's so traumatic to even consider that people are just like, I can't handle this. And even now, like, people can't handle that information. But now we know, oh, yeah, there's clones, and they put you in clones and they do all kinds of stuff, or whatever they are. Maybe they're copies. It's like there's copies and then there's clones. So anyway, so I think she was murdered and given breast cancer and God knows what else. Yeah.
Wow. Well, what about you, Eve? Have you been targeted over the years? And tell us maybe
Yeah.
a little about that.
Well, I think the first love bite, because when I think, like, only in hindsight do I see these things like, oh. But my perspective is also that I try to take an overview of this on a higher spiritual perspective based on what my connection to the Most High, or Christ, whatever you want to call it. So, but in the old days, let's say, I was still doing a lot of my own recovery from trauma work, because I really wanted to know what happened to me, because the alien abductions were in such amnesia, but I knew they happened. There was like fragmented memories. And so I was doing not only hypnotherapy and classic therapy, but I was doing lucid dreaming practice with post-hypnotic suggestions, and then in a lucid dream state, and see what would happen. And then it started to trigger some things, but then I wasn't able to get enough out of it. It was like there was a block. And so during that time, I guess I didn't have my child yet, but I did. I ended up getting pregnant, which was interesting. But I wanted to have my son. And then after I had my son, I started doing more research and therapy. And then it seemed like right when I was doing that, that's when I got hit over the head with the love bite. It happened actually right after I started the support group, or maybe it was a little bit before that. It was actually 94, 95, 96. So that was right around the time Dr. Karla Turner died. We were talking to Barbara Bartholic and really wanting to explore this, and actually to even go to visit Barbie in Oklahoma. And then that was stopped short by an abduction and a threat to, a serious one. And then I got ill, so I couldn't go. So I couldn't do the hypnotic regression with Barbie. And so that kind of set off this whole drama of just doing my research and being involved with different levels of it. But I wasn't able to go deeper. And then I got hit over the head with a love bite. So I think now, and in retrospect, it was part of a long-term manipulation. But then again, it led me to what I'm doing today, and I've learned a lot, and I can't say that this was all, quote, a negative experience. In other words, I'm learning from this. I'm going to do the best I can with whatever I'm learning. I'm going to make it work for me and for others. So, but as part of the, like, one of the reasons, let's say somebody has a love bite, or if it's a manipulated, engineered thing that doesn't turn out right, or it deviates our attention from something else, then that might have been maybe the reason. It could have deviated me from doing deeper hypnotherapy and trauma recovery to find out deeper levels of what really happened to me and what was going on with the people in my group. So, and I think it was like, and yeah, I mean, I was threatened, of course, with cancer, poisonings, several poisonings, and financial issues, and divorce. But that was inevitable, because in hindsight, many people who've had, let's say, a lifetime of abductions, a lot of times you don't find out until you're an adult, like after you had your kids or before. And so a lot of times relationships break up because when you remember these things, that's deep trauma, and your whole worldview changes. So if you're with a partner who can't handle that worldview, or they're not emotionally intelligent because they haven't worked on their own stuff, then the relationship's not going to work out. So, and we're learning this now in like complex trauma recovery and narcissistic abuse recovery, that really when someone comes in for like marriage counseling, and let's say one person is the classic codependent who's married to a narcissist, and they're trying to pull the narcissist into therapy, we'll see how well that works. And it's like, a joke, a running joke now. It's like, you can't do therapy with a narcissist or somebody who has not recovered and chooses not to, and is actually on the more manipulative, abusive, neglectful part of the relationship dynamic. They just don't do therapy. They'll blame and gaslight the person. So a lot of mind control. I mean, I'm kind of going on a spin here, but this is what helped me understand and crack the code, so to speak, of mind control and narcissistic abuse. So once we understand the dynamic of, let's say, a classic narcissistic personality disorder abuser, and a codependent who's complementary partner, and you understand the abuse dynamic, then you'll understand how everything works. Because if you don't understand that disorder of the narcissist, for example, and complex trauma, you won't be able to get your part of therapy done, because you're still busy gaslighting yourself and doing what is the complex trauma complement of what a narcissist would do. So this is where the whole CPTSD, what they call complex PTSD, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, which is, something we have to understand about ourselves so that we can do our own trauma recovery, especially if you're still in a relationship or a family system, or, with someone who's like a classic narcissist, even if they're covert. It's very hard to get well. And if you're being handled by them, for example, family system, or let's say they really are a real handler, you won't get well, and you won't remember things because it's not safe to do so, unless accidentally you just happen to have spontaneous recall. So a part of the recollection process is that you must be safe, and like the deeper parts of yourself that might be responsible for holding the altars, they know before you know whether or not it's safe. So this is where you kind of have to be in tune with your spiritual and emotional intelligence to create the safety through a recovery process and support, so that you can set the foundation for a safe recovery. Because otherwise, you can get constantly targeted and killed and made sick, and oh my God, all the things that so many of us have gone through, almost losing our lives or losing our loved ones who were murdered. So in hindsight, I mean, that's why I think in my therapeutic process, safety is like the absolute most important thing that we need to have before we even try to like get more memories back and find out what happened. And because mind control really is about relational dynamics and the safety needed to recover authentic beingness, which when we're dissociated, we got to dissociate from that beingness in order to survive. So we have to recreate safety to come back to ourselves. And so it is DID, recovery from DID. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. So could you tell us about Andy Perot? Now, I've met I've talked to him before in the past, and this was right after he got out of prison.
Wow,
I
really?
think it might have been 2008. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He was setting up a landscape business, and then next thing you know, he's down in Texas. He went and he got in jail, and he got released, and now he's back going to jail because he murdered his girlfriend.
Yeah, I heard that. And I didn't have anything more. I think I spoke to him I think the last time was in 1999. It was quite a long time ago. It was after he was really had memories come back, and then it was almost like he remembered too much too soon, and then got severely targeted. And they would always try to target and reprogram you. And when that happens, like if there's not a handle on the rage, and like your family system is totally Illuminati and mind controlled and messed up, which happened to him, and I know that he couldn't get help. So when you're in this recovery process and you discover, oh shit, they're like in on it, right? And then it can create this whole paranoid thing of, everybody's in on it and they're a spy after me and they're my handler. And then it can get really crazy and paranoid where, they could act out in anger with an uncontrollable rage alter. So that I think happens, which is why recovery has to be safe. And my view now, I mean, after years of seeing this, because so many of their family systems are, let's say, some aspect of Illuminati, could be secret society, could be whatever, but almost always there is a spiritual component of ownership that's manipulating them on another level, that unless we nip that one in the bud first, along with trauma recovery, it's going to continue to be a problem and then keep steering people in the wrong direction with other relationships of other people who are also in the same kinds of family systems. So there's this whole web of interdimensional manipulation going on, that if you're still tied into that ownership through some bloodline curse, for lack of a better term, you're just going to be webbed in with the same people, more or less, until you get out of it and start being much more mindful about, being safe, basically. So yeah, I mean, that was unfortunate, because Andy's case had a lot of things in it that had just came up from the Montauk thing, where like the time travel and the superhuman abilities, and those things are real, and he's probably an earlier prototype, and now people are finally coming out. But it's so hard to come out if they're still under this kind of heavy control and threats. You know, it's hard.
Was
Yeah.
was there anything that he told you that you didn't put in the story? Maybe you could tell us now.
Oh Lord.
Was there a lot more content that didn't make it into
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, there was, and I didn't want to say anything, but I think he had some memories of the future that have not occurred yet, um, that tie into angelic help, good angelic help. I remember that. So, and there's, I think, more yet to come that's playing out. Like this whole, a lot of people it's into this biblical prophecy. Is it this Antichrist thing? And what are the families really trying to do? And when I say families, it's within the perspective of what we learned, let's say, from the Fritz Springmeier work and those Illuminati bloodlines. And now, like, they're called hierarchy system families. And so if these families have unrecovered DID assets in high positions, right, in many sectors of society, they're continuing to run the agenda until, let's say, some of their family members defect or actually get recovered, or many of them become Christians, and they defect completely from it and disassociate from the strongholds of those spirits. And some people think it's like the archons, and what's connected with the archons and the ancient gods, like the false gods and all that. So yeah, it's a big thing, because it seems like they're prepping for some kind of large scale war to claim humanity and claim the souls, because we know that they use those souls for energy, but also as slaves and human trafficking. So, and this is actually something that has tied in with research of, for example, in alien abduction. Dr. Corrado Malanga of Italy, who was a PhD in organic chemistry and a did 30 something years in the alien UFO abduction thing. And he found that people who are classic abductees who had come to him, that usually they're taken within the first 6 days of life. So these beings come interdimensionally, or do they do whatever they do within the first 6 days of life, and then implant a type of consciousness implant in the person. And I don't know if it's their brain or their mind, but that's there, and that's it's trying to, how shall I say it, prevent us from a direct connect with our eternal spirit that he called anima. So there's less lack of communication and coherence between the mind, spirit, soul, and the body. So the whole idea with the therapeutic process was to reintegrate a coherent connection and direct connect with eternal spirit through the heart, but also addressing the dissociation. And that's the hard part, because sometimes you need a lot of therapy to kind of go through really resolving that. It's not a quick fix with a certain, hypnotherapy, like one hypnotic regression ain't going to do it. But basically, they're taking advantage of dissociation to insert themselves, to work themselves through our consciousness so that we become them and their agenda, and use our bodies as containers and as avatars for their consciousness. But they're not connected to the eternal spirit, which is why they have to insert themselves in us and then revivify themselves through us, through these abductions. So it is a vampirization process in many ways, but it's also a control system of our consciousness. So this is something that I felt like this is really important, because if they are compromising our will, the aspect of our will that's connected to our eternal spirit that knows truth, then that's a problem. So we need to address that problem so that we can, how should I say it? The biggest issue with a lot of these advanced beings, wherever they're coming from, is the manipulation of our perception. And we know this in the love bite for sure, right? And many things. So we have to be subtle enough in our awareness to know if and when this is taking place, so they can't have power over us, and that we have more power over ourselves and them, actually. So, yeah.
So they take the children as leverage to coerce the parents. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't know if there's so much going on that people remember. I mean, they'll take them from early childhood, and it's multi-generational. A lot of times it goes back, depending on what that particular race is looking for. But sometimes they use the parents themselves in their own children's experiences if they can. Like, for example, many of the early books, researchers, some people would remember, they were taking on a craft, but they would want to use them to help, like, cuddle the babies, like the hybrid babies, or they would help another abductee, sometimes someone the same age, or sometimes a younger child, and to comfort and help the aliens in their abductions of other humans. So they would actually have them as helpers in the abduction process, but they would be under mind control. And so if a parent found out, oh my God, I was used this way to help, soothe my child in an abduction, like, they would feel horrible about that. They would. And Barbara Bartholic actually discovered a lot of those kinds of things that went on in the abductions that were just really uncomfortable to think about. It's just, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so can alien abductions drain your sexual energy, making you impotent?
Sure. Yeah, and they could do the opposite too. They like that too, Yeah, they can do so much. I mean, they could try to change your sexuality. They've done that where, I think it was a case in the Dark Side of Cupid. Oh, and it was a wild one. It was one of Barbie's cases that she gave me from years ago, where one of the men, he was gay, and then they set up the woman with him, and I think they wanted to get her pregnant, and I think she did get pregnant and have a child, and I don't know if it was known if, like, the child was really hers and her husband's, or this other man who was gay and it was, like, put together on a ship with him. So sometimes they do things like that where, you're normally one sexuality, and then they'll try to make you want to be with the other sex, and then try to, sometimes I wonder if some of the transgenderism now was part of an experiment, because a lot of people in these projects, a lot of them are bisexual, or, it's just the way that they've been utilized sexually. Yeah. So.
What about now? Years ago, I was in this ET chat group, and some kid came up to was just chatting and said that he was in, um, very concerned because they switched his soul to his sister's body and his sister.
Wow.
So, have you heard any stories like that? They can like switch you into your siblings, or
Yeah, actually. And I didn't know. I've only heard a few things, but let's say if you have an alter personality that was created through a trauma split, and for example, like when someone is trauma split as a young child, sometimes they'll name an alter with somebody that they know in their family, like a sibling, or a stuffed animal, or somebody that they knew when they were a kid between those ages. But I've heard that they could do that. They take a split that has the identity of a sibling, and then they put that split in the sibling. And maybe they can, if they're genetically similar enough, they might be able to do that. Like, it's basically, they would hide memories, like compartmentalized memories and information in people's minds, and have that as like this super, secure information system where, you don't even have access to some of your own memories because the altar is in the sibling or something. So I actually have heard of that. It's weird, but I have heard of that. Yeah.
the altar itself could be another gender.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of times they do have other gender altars. Yeah. Or like in some ritual abuse cases, I think it was a gal name, and she's dead now, unfortunately. I wrote about it. Uh, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she had a alter personality who was a male who could shapeshift into a reptilian, and really did, physically, as far as I know, according to her memories. So yeah, they can do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So, how many altars could one particular person have? As many?
Well, some, ritual abuse survivors claim that they have, hundreds, if not more, but I think it depends on how they split people. And it may be like major splits are the only ones strong enough to take a split from the split. So you get a primary split at a particular age, and then they do a split from the main split, or maybe no more than 2 or 3, and then take splits off there. But I think it's Stuart Swerdlow who had a diagram of that, and Fritz Springmeier too. Like, they had the 13 by 13 grid, for example, and then there would be altars like between 1 and 13, and then a main altar would have a whole chain of altars under that altar, and then there would be like 12 main altars, and then like a number of altars from the other ones, and they could only be accessed from the one that they took it from. But it depends on how strong the altar split is. um, yeah, but maybe in the milab programs, it seems like some of the people that I've heard, it was as if they were taken later in life, maybe when they were, well, not so young, and then they were put in a program later. Like, I think it was Daryl James was introduced later in life when he was already in the military as an adult. And then some of them seem to be taken at a later age, where that maybe that's why they remembered so much, because they didn't have the classic altar splits that are as easy to access as those who are like, you were born and raised a DID kind of thing. Yeah.
So, what is it? 13 cubed. I think Penny Bradley mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was 2,197 is the maximum
Oh,
altars.
wow. Yeah.
But yeah, who can put a limit on human consciousness anyway? So, all
Yeah.
right. In your own words, what is an altar? Is it like a fragment of our own soul that's been split off? What do you think it is?
Yeah. It's a fragment of usually the part that carries the emotional component, or energetic emotional component, but that's part of your soul too, of a irreconcilable emotional conflict, or physical pain, or moral conflict. And then it has the emotional energy and the belief systems that might have that experience, that's protecting the core from that reality. It's like they can't, let's say sexual abuse is usually the primary way to really do a good split, because they can't fathom the betrayal and the pain, or the lack of ethics of being made to service at 6 years old or whatever, right? So they just block it out altogether, and they make an altar be that part. So the altar contains that personality that was split. That's the emotional component. So it could be, the rage part or the grief part, or over the sex drive part. So it could be that part. And then on top of that, then they do the chains of programming training on top of the main part that was split, that has like the emotional energy or the soul energy part. But then it's the chains of programming put on top of the altar that makes them the operative or the asset that they'll just pull up, usually with that same emotional quotient or a code that they now programmed into a part. So sometimes it's triggered through that same emotional feeling that was triggered in the beginning, or that created it in the beginning.
So that's how we could get our memories back if we were using these
Yeah,
programs.
yeah. Although
Obviously,
it's terrible though, because it's not easy to do, because sometimes there is, the programming that you will not remember this, and then the booby traps. And so we know that for to be true, and that could be dangerous, like suicide programming. And this is something that actually, it was Michael Relf of the Mars Records, one of the early super soldiers. I think he had a 20 in back, and then his wife actually did the therapy and the deprogramming with a type of biometer that registered the energy of emotional charge, and then discovered the memories and the booby trap programming. And there would be like triple layers of programming that were instilled, so that you will not remember this, or you will have a health problem, or this will happen, or that will happen, or if somebody ever asks you about this, you say this doesn't exist. And so they went through all that stuff to deprogram in that way. And then it was his perspective, and it's mine also, that if you're not dealing with some form of, they call it demons for a, there is this black magic component of mind control if you're in one of these projects, or even, I would say, even anybody who's been abused by like a pedophile or abuser, or a bad abuse family. There's probably some demon or some, a familiar spirit or evil spirit, like that's connected with the family line, you know? So at some point you're dealing with that. And that's what he said. He became a Christian, but I haven't heard anything from him in a long time. I know his wife did die, and he thought that she was targeted to death with brain cancer. So, and that's what happens to a lot of people who find out a lot, and then they kind of make their, and you might hear about them for a year or two or three, and then boom, they're gone, and you never hear from them again. So it's always good to get the information early when someone does a disclosure, because there was many that they put on their story on a website, and then it's gone, and then nobody remembers, like these people. Like now, people have a short-term memory of history because of the internet, and I think that's by design, so that now, like, oh, they don't know what happened 20 years ago with some, like the testimony of Beth Gooby, or this guy named Seth Coronado, or many of the others who came forward with significant testimonies, and you never hear about them.
like Jason Rice in our community.
Really?
Have you heard? You've heard of Jason Rice?
I don't know. Tell me more about that.
So he was discussing about the moon bases and what's it called, career return programs, is what is actually a 20 and back. That's the name, is a career return program.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he was working with he was like the Cabal's version of their own secret space program.
Okay.
So it wasn't it IDARF? Does anybody remember Jason? I don't know, Jason Rice. But so we have oh, I wanted to mention, now you were saying people were programmed to not remember. Now, years ago, I don't know if this would still work. For anybody out there is playing around with reverse speech analysis, I would
Oh,
record and forward, was I part of the Montauk Project? And in
uh,
reverse, it always said, that's not real. I'm not supposed to talk about it.
are you kidding? Really?
And I would ask it in different ways. I wouldn't say, in my part of the Montauk, I would say, what did I serve in the Montauk? Was the Montauk Project, was I in it? Or so I would rewrite it, and it would always say that in reverse. So
It would say that it was not real. Is that what it said?
Yeah, and yeah, in reverse. So you can hear what you're some. Have you had any experience with reverse speech
Oh, God.
analysis?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I had a friend or a colleague in where in Ohio, I think it was, who did reverse speech many years ago. In fact, I interviewed David Oates when he lived in Bonsall, which is like the same area where I used to live. He had a major UFO sighting like way back when. And so I learned about that. And I and my friend, her name was Pat Mason, we would do a lot of reverse speech. I even bought one of those recorders, and I wasn't as good at hearing. So you have to have a real ear for it. But she did a lot of reversals. And then we would have conversations on the phone about alien abductions. And I had a dream or this or that. And then I wrote an article on all the different unusual reversals that came up. And you could tell, like in someone's speech, if they're MPD, for example, or what they're really thinking, it's just kind of funny, or the real intentions. And I remember there was some reversals about aliens, and I thought that was strange. But when we talked about grays, we called them gray wheelers, would come up as the name in reverse, and it was a weird name that would come up. And then the reptilians would come up in another way. And then another one, there was a reversals that says, we were talking about dreams, and then the reversal said, they amend these dreams, which means they can give you, what do you call it, fake memories or screen memories. And there was something else had come up, which was really interesting about a lucid dream thing. And then the spirit, let's say the spirit was speaking to the other person, and it was saying, go to the area of 7, the chamber filled with the choir. And it was a spiritual realm of goodness where angels, I guess, would be, and singing like the angels in the choirs. And so we would have these conversations, and then these things would come up in reverse. But I don't know if it said that it was fake or it wasn't real. But I know that our spirit will speak truth in certain archetypal ways. So who's to say, like, I believe in a very, let's say, higher level of consciousness, we can perceive this reality. Like I've been in, let's say, a realization experience where my perception of Earth incarnation realm experience is not like, it's a round Earth or a flat Earth. It's all a big holographic dream that we're co-dreaming together with the all that you could be in union with, and realize that you're dreaming. We're co-dreaming. And so so it depends on your level of consciousness, what's quote real. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So how many sessions or regressions have you think you might have done, and do you think you can help people integrate through what they were in these programs?
Yes. Now my position is not just hypnotherapy, although it's very helpful, but learning about complex trauma, which is, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, knowing your tendency under certain triggering issues and conditions. That's your primary way of, surviving. And if you know you have DID, and then working with, I would like always cover it with prayer first to remove interference factors, which will mess with you a lot. And then getting to the, we call it issue, memory, belief, which is we always want to get the core of an issue, which always has to do with some experience and a belief and an emotional component or a conflict component. And we bring truth to that experience or that young part. But a lot of times the young part knows exactly what happened, but it could be split off, like depending on how severe it is, it could be split off in many alters because of the severity. So bringing safety to that part of you can bring back the memory. And it's not always like a video clip of specific things that come up. Sometimes you get the emotional component only within this body sense, and then you get the pain later, you get the grief later, you get the rage later, all in the part that had to store it in these different pieces. So it's bringing safety and self-understanding of the complex trauma and the DID type of structure, if you know it. And I believe doing the prayers is really, really important. But this brings in a lot of this conflict with people who are like, well, I'm not a Christian and I think that's all fake. And So learning how to deal with what's connecting to these ones who are laying claim to us, and disengaging from their claim. But the trouble is, if we have dissociation going on, we're kind of disempowered from the connection with our eternal spirit because of the split itself, because they are accessing the splits. And until we come to an integrated beingness with the conflict that created the split, they still have power over us. So this is where the power of prayer comes in, to create like a safe haven so that it's easier to access whatever created the split. And sometimes there's a being who's a guard over that personality alter. Like sometimes it's a reptilian or a demon or a familiar spirit in the family line that actually holds that in amnesia, that it's like, you know. So that's where you get into the spiritual component. But we're learning a lot through, there's a lot of therapists who are like doing ministry therapy with ritual abuse survivors. And so the more successful ones tend to be Christians, but there's others who are not. It's just that when you're dealing with high level black magic, and if the person is still giving permission to these authorities and whatever they are, then you're fighting with the wind. So it's hard. I mean, they could do therapy on their emotional stuff, but if the entities are constantly tweaking the knobs, and interfering, it makes it very hard. And then it makes it dangerous for them too, because then they could get the booby trap going on because the demon's controlling it, and then they go and commit suicide or something. So that's why it's like, yeah, it can be difficult. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. All right, so tell us a little bit about any regressions that you've worked with people that were super soldiers. So maybe how often do you find people that were used, and maybe share some stories.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have permission to speak on, because I have to keep confidentiality. So, but yes, I have, and
But you have what about on your website? You have a blog where you share
oh
those
yeah,
stories. Yeah.
gosh, oh that was a big boom.
What was that?
Yeah, there was a big boom outside. I don't know what it was. Yeah. My website is kind of a mess. I used to have it under all these like article categories, and then you could read the different articles of people's firsthand experiences and what they remembered. So I had a whole bunch that were like the reptilian and the military, the milab, and the abduction and the love bite, or different experiences where people went into detail of what they learned in their process and what they were willing to go public with. And so that's a lot of stuff that's not even in my book or my books. So yeah, people discover different things, and sometimes they don't want to talk about it because it's icky. And then some people have, like Randy Kramer did go public, and came quite far. And we worked with him. Like, actually, it was one of Malanga's colleagues that worked with him for several hours, and I'm sure he did more after that. And we had a lot of conversations and email exchanges, and then even before Andy Basaggio went public, we had a lot of conversations. We didn't do a regression, but yeah, it's just that I so much is confidential. I can't speak about it. So
Have you ever communicated to extraterrestrials through your regressions?
some of them, yeah, some of them come through and they'll claim that they're a guardian or this or that, and yeah. And sometimes, like I remember in the early days, when I was working in a support group, and even with Andy Perro, that the alien handlers would come in my dreams and make threats, and they would say, "Leave them alone, they're mine," and or they would try to make us not be able to access each other in the astral realm, which a lot of people can do because they realize how they've been used in these projects. A lot of them are psychics and remote viewers and time travelers and whatever, and they already have these abilities. And so that what you could find out. But then the interlopers or the aliens or the handlers, they could try to stop that process because they know how to do that also. Yeah.
Can we? A question from Francine: can we escape being used in astral missions?
Yeah. It's out. How shall I say? It's a matter of integrating your alters that are being accessed, if you know that's happening. Although our dreams can be invaded anyway by beings or even people if those doorways are open in our consciousness. And even just like being, let's say, married to someone or living in the same house, you can have astral mixing in your dream space. So, yeah, but I think integration and therapy and doing like prayers beforehand, before bed, and like closing the windows of any access portals and stuff. Yeah. What we call spiritual
Well,
hygiene.
I
Yeah.
sometimes cover up mirrors while I'm sleeping. The mirror's right on my bed.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And
Okay, I just wonder if that's not too superstitious there.
yeah, I've had things come through jewelry which were really unusual. This is a weird one. I had a piece of jewelry that was given to me by someone, a family member, and I think she got it off eBay, of all things. And then when I had it, um, this is really weird. I would have a lot of conversations with people over the years, mostly confidential, but learn a lot of really interesting stuff about secret societies and bloodlines and who they're following and why and blah blah blah. And so I had a like astral visitation where these out of the body like magicians or whatever. There's like a whole group of them came in my room, and there was like a leader, and it was like from France, and always these people in this particular group from France came, and they were in my bedroom, and they were looking at it like my dresser, looking at all the jewelry, and he was looking for the piece of jewelry that was the necklace that I was given to. That I was given, and then this, I think it was like an heirloom that came from France, and that I didn't know where it came from, but then they found it, and then he showed me and he pointed at it, and basically what he was telling me was that this piece of jewelry is a finder for a particular person of a particular bloodline, and that's what they were looking for. And then they found it, and they found me through this piece of jewelry. So that was a weird thing. Like sometimes they find you through jewelry, or yeah, it's a strange thing. And but I prayed over it, and I never saw them again. But I thought it was unusual that, yeah, it's like an object link of some sort. Yeah, I don't know. I
Well,
just had to say that it was a
well,
weird thing.
what about your bloodline? So yeah,
I have wondered about that. I didn't find out until I actually had a cousin who was adopted, and then we did research because I have a 9-generation history on my mom's side. And then we found out through genetic testing, and that it was related to several royalty lines, and the French Tudor line actually through a second cousin line, but it was direct. So, and like a bunch of 6 different kings or whatever. So there is stuff. And I believe too that it went maternal, because I think there was something on the maternal line that was of interest. And this was something that, I mean, it's not everybody may agree, that Dr. Corrado Malanga seemed to think that the aliens in particular have a greater desire to look in some of the maternal lineages. And we know that in the Jewish tradition, you're not a Jewish unless your mom is Jewish, and everything's about the mother line for some reason. So we decided to like, well, what's going on with the mother line? Because I felt that, well, in my family, it's both sides, but definitely the mother line. Yeah. So I did a search on, because I with several women who happened to be a particular type of woman that had a particular type of experience, or a particular type of gift. We'll say gifts. And that we all came from these Scandinavian lines, which was really interesting. And so there was something that we felt that was through the mitochondrial lines. When we traced it all the way back, it was actually a Scandinavian, which I didn't even know that I had. But it was an interesting thing, because I think there's something to the mitochondrial lineage, which is only the mother line. So, yeah, it remains to be seen, really.
well,
Yeah.
is your family supportive of your work?
Yeah, more or less. Although I think they had a different opinion of it in the beginning. And what I discovered through my complex trauma recovery and inquiry, what was revealed to me like through the Holy Spirit as well, that there was a level of deception and programming through an angle that was what I'm going to call, let's say, in a family system, You can have a particular belief system or something that's normalized or believed in the family line that actually operates as what I call the operational cult handling system. That they would want to believe that a certain opinion about, let's say, the ETs, and that if as long as you held that opinion of the ETs, you would go into what the programming was, which would be to I think some of my programming in hindsight, I shouldn't be saying this, was to become a channeler for some benevolent ET thing, which now I realize that would have been falling into the programming, which is not true. So if you want to hold the belief that, oh, well, all the aliens in my experience are good, they must be good, that would be denying your programming and what really happened. So I had to basically drop all those beliefs and just go for, what am I picking up in trauma therapy and, lucid dreaming, and, what's answered prayer telling me. And, it's like you have to do a deep practice of, I think Buddhist people do this naturally, where they have to go into stillness where you don't, no desire, no fear. You go into the stillness and you just observe the arising of whatever comes up. So you have to perceiving clearly, regardless of what you want to believe or not want to believe or what you're afraid of. And you just observe. And then that's where a lot of information came through, actually, in those states, and through different teachers who would come and help me, actually. So, yeah.
I think the most accurate religion on the planet is if you were to blend Buddhism with Christianity. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I would say what my experience was with respect to Christ, I would probably be considered a heretic by the standard Christians. Although I believe that there is a deep truth that is accessible through grace that comes through faith and the revelation through the Spirit of truth in the eternal, which will, I think it gives you whatever you're able to receive for who you are and what you need. You know what I mean? So the whole idea is like, how can we bring people to whatever they need for where they're at, and to build and encourage their self-discovery and their personal connection to Christ and to the eternal that is good and that wants nothing but the truth, and then just allow that growth process in a therapeutic process. And that's really what Barbara Bartholic, she had so much research that never hit the light of day, and that when she died, all that stuff was kept by, I guess, a family member. And I'm telling you, I wish that we had access to her research. But what she did do for all of us who had worked with her, and I know that she knew the truth behind, like, we were in what I call the death throes of the love bite, this horrible obsession. And you always want to believe that somehow you're going to be with this person and they're your soulmate, and then you just keep hoping and you can't let go of that hope, and it's like this obsession that won't leave you. But she knew all along, like, what something was, but she would allow us to discover just by asking certain questions and kind of nursing us along to self-discover what the truth was in our experience. And she was very careful to not tell us, well, this is what it is. You have to discover what it is and just keep asking questions. And that, because you can't tell people what it is, you have to allow them to discover in their own truth process. And that's the best way to go, if you ask me. Yeah.
All right. Well, we got a few more questions and we can wrap it up. But can you tell us about your own abduction experience? Were you ever taken on any ships, or were you in the secret space program? What do you think? Did a 20 back?
Let's see. What propelled me to try to find out what happened in the early days? I knew there was definitely like a classic abduction. Oh yeah. I mean, when I was like, gosh, 3 or 4 for sure. And then missing time, and then what would be taken on a ship and then not remembering. And then, so those kind of things happened, but I didn't get a lot of details. And then later, the milab stuff happened. It seemed to happen more when I was working with my support group, where some of us actually were taken together, like me and James Bartley were taken together several times, and several people that we corresponded with, and then we would have joint memories of like where we were taken. And some of it was time travel stuff, or appeared to be time travel in other eras and other countries. So yeah, but then that kind of subsided after I stopped interacting more personally with more of the milabs and doing more of my recovery work. It ceased or lessened those memories that were coming up that seemed to be like being involved in something. So I could say yes, I think I was, but I don't know for sure, like if there was a name of it, and I don't really know for sure. I can't say, but my dad did work for Lockheed, and I believe that many of the people under aerospace, high-ranking clearance people, those children were used in projects. Yeah, I mean, we're finding out now. Yeah.
There's the connection right there. So tell us, did you have missing time as a child?
You know, it wasn't as overt, like you would hear about. It wasn't as overt. I mean, I didn't really notice it, but I know other family members did remember things and then they forgot it. And then I remember what they told me, and the whole family was taken. I'm sure of it. So, yeah, I don't remember a lot of missing time. So I didn't have the obvious things. So it led me to think, well, maybe it never happened because it didn't have those, signatures. So, yeah.
What about needle marks, scoop marks?
Yeah, what do you call those things behind your ear? And then later, when I had X-rays, noticed something on my back, actually in a vertebrae. And then I remember I had an experience. We had this with James Bartley. I think he remembered part of it. Like we remember, how you're in experiences with people, and then they'll remember a part of it and a joint part of it, but not remember some of it. And then one of my dreams, well, it was a dream. They were checking implants. And then the implant was a certain part of my body where, in order to, I think they did it to erase memories or to find out what happened. So they'd scan these implants, and then it would be like, then they could tell what happened when you were gone or when you were on a op or something. And then they do something. So I think it made like the memory go away. So it's like they stored it and then they were able to take it away through scanning an implant or something. So that was kind of weird.
Well, what
Yeah.
about secret space program? Do you think you served off world?
Well, I've had some fragments of memories, but I can't say for sure. Like Mars, yeah. There was a Mars thing. In fact, this is kind of weird. I remember I was talking with Stephanie and Michael Relf many years ago, when he was still going public about his Mars record stuff. And then I was going to do actually a regression with her, but it never happened because I didn't go to Australia or whatever it was. But so we were talking a lot, and because I was doing an interview with him. So I remember one night I had this bizarre dream, and then I realized I think it was more than a dream, where I was actually taken to Mars, and I don't even remember how, but I ended up in this building that was actually above ground, which was interesting. And looking at the mountains, and there was actually a little bit of ice, like water. And then VIPs from the State Department who were there on this facility in Mars. And they were, I don't remember, I wish I would have wrote it down, but they were like trying to say that they were VIPs and trying to make me feel special. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? And anyway, so when I woke up, right, that morning, or in the middle of the night, however it was, all the power in that neighborhood went off for several hours. So I'm wondering, like, something really happened, because and I told Michael about that, and he seemed to think, yeah, that's what they do. So, and I don't know if it was because of him, you know what I mean? Because I would interview so many people, and then sometimes I would get visitations from their handlers or their aliens. So it wouldn't be because I was, in a project, for example, that they just wanted, me maybe to learn more about what they were trying to tell me, or well, they didn't want me to know, for example. Yeah.
Well, I think you've got some work to do on that. And if you like to have a regression, I'll be happy to volunteer some time. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So, can aliens capture sovereign souls?
That's an interesting question. Well, some people believe they can. I mean, what's sovereign, right? I mean, I think sovereign, my idea of sovereign now would be somebody who's completely realized in their eternal spirit, that's, goes in and through maybe all incarnational experiences. So I think the more deeply lucid you are of that nature, the less likely they can entrap you. Although, you know, I believe that they can entrap somebody as they're coming into incarnation, and then that lifetime they're under that influence until we become lucid enough to connect to something larger than ourselves, like God, and then do whatever we can to disconnect. So, and sometimes it is like energy body work where you can see like how these entities will embed themselves in certain parts of the body. And that's what Malanga found. That's what many energy healers find, like even with implants or entities that will link in to certain chakras, for example, you know?
All right, let's go to questions from the audience. We have James Earl Cash is asking, what do you think about the late Dr. Didn't you talk?
Oh, Dr.
Sorry.
Karla Turner.
Yeah.
Yeah. We already mentioned that. Yeah. I think she was off early. Yeah. Yeah.
What about her work? Do you think
Well,
wasn't
yeah. Well, a lot of it was based on what Barbara Bartholic found in her hypnotherapy regressions and what they found out. So I would concur, although I don't have as much of a negativistic or agnostic view, because a lot of what seemed to have helped me in my experiences was a greater spiritual reality realization with something greater than myself that led me to think it's not all negative. We're not all hopeless. We can get out of this, you know. So I don't feel as negative and hopeless about it. Actually, yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any funny stories to share about the love bites? Or maybe
Ah,
one funny story?
Lord, God. Well, maybe it was the one about the strip clubs. Um, that had some artwork. A woman who had, well, actually, she was married, and it could have been kind of like a manipulated relationship. I don't know if it was a love bite per se, but he kept going to strip clubs, and then he got hosted by a reptilian, and then he changed, and then she would see the reptilian overshadowing him, and he basically changed as he got hosted, and he wouldn't really do his work. He couldn't seem to get rid of it, but he got it through going to strip clubs and hanging out with like prostitutes in these strip clubs in like New Orleans, and then she saw like psychically how they were connected in with the architecture of the buildings, where there was interdimensional portals and access that made it easy in certain architectures and people to host, like reptilians would basically come through and link in with like the buildings and control like what was going on like in bank buildings and strip clubs and like weird things like that. So she found that out through like this reptilian hosted husband and what was going on in her life. Was kind of it wasn't really a love bite. It was an engineered marriage through unrecovered trauma because she was taken when she was really young. And it was actually a satanic priest who tried to do a ritual on her when she was 3 months old. But she was like one of these super powered, like spiritual people or had help. And then the priest couldn't do what he was going to do. But then she went through a regression to find out what happened. And then once she was able to find out the route to the accessing through this satanic priest or something, then none of these things happened anymore. She didn't have as many problems. So she thought that she found the route to why they were accessing her. But when you have unrecovered trauma like that, you could be led into bad relationships until we really get to the root of that trauma. So that's why now, I mean, my focus is, getting through the narcissistic abuse trauma. And once we do that and recover from the DID, then these things come up more naturally as we're in a more safer place spiritually. Yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit more about your websites. So we have Eve.
Yeah.
Is that EVELORG?
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think somebody was
EveLorgen.com.
complaining. Yeah. Okay. We'll get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
evelorgen.com, and it's also alienlovebite.com. And then I have a Alien Love Bite Telegram group where I actually am able to post on that more quickly than the website, keeping up with that. Eventually, I'm going to do like a collected works and another republish the Dark Side of Cupid because, yeah, it's not available anymore. So you can only get my books through me as a hard copy, by the way. So you just have to email me or contact me directly to get my book.
And where can we get a session from?
Oh,
With you?
well, just on my website, there is a contact form, or email me directly. And that's how I do it. Just email me directly and ask, and then usually through Zoom or telephone.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, let's see. I think audience members actually might have had another question here. Is the DHS, Department of Human Services, a possible agency that may be involved in the MyLab process?
No, Department of well, it depends on what state. Is that like the social services or Homeland Security or
I think you get your food stamp money through them.
oh
Get food
god.
stamps.
I've heard, oh my god, I've heard a lot of things through people who are being targeted, and I think Homeland Security was one of them, one of the agencies that were
I
involved.
know
But
Andy Perot said like some of the upper levels, like the FBI, were brainwashed by the Germans. Paperclips.
oh yeah,
You
well
remember
yeah,
that?
yeah. But in one of my cases, in the Mia Adams case in the Love Bite, it was a my lab my lab, but she was an abductee classic, and then she was targeted by an FBI agent to quote neutralize her. But then he found out he was actually her mitochondrial son through a hybrid, experimentation. But then he was abducted, mind controlled, and engineered to get into the FBI from his own alien and military, whatever engineering, to get in the FBI and then work as an FBI agent to work to neutralize her. So a lot of people they're actually engineered to get into these alphabet soup places to have high positions. So, this is where the hierarchy system families are really operating in, almost all the alphabet soup agencies and high levels are already these people, or
Interesting.
engineered to get into it through their own programming or training or whatever influence. Yeah.
Right. Because according to, well, it's not just the real raw news. We had Dr. Boylan and, of course, Dr. Sala. Phil Schneider discussed about underground bases where there's giant cloning facilities where certain deep staters can be cloned out. And I wanted to mention this because real raw news. Back in a month ago, almost a month ago, I did an update about Trump and I had some predictions. So I do my own regression work, and this individual, Mr. New York, that I was working with, had some predictions about the future from 2022, and that just some of the future predictions was that there was going to be a massive overtake of not only House, Congress, of course, Trump's coming back, but also there was a warning that there would be an attack in New York City, November 23rd. So I was looking at the latest rumor mill news here. Well, actually, that is another website, and this is what showed up here. So I know it might be a tabloid, but yeah. So there was November 25th. They I didn't just, I thought I put this up here.
Depends on what year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but November. Oh, I'm sorry. That's November 25th. There was a warehouse in Jamaica, Queens, where there was 150 Russian tactical suicide drones. So they're going to release them onto the parade. But in the regression, it through another source, it was discussed that it was Israelis wanting to do a false FLAG. I don't know. I'm probably saying too much for YouTube, but so that has been averted. But that's why you all should subscribe to Super Soldier Talk so you can get the latest information. In the future, what's happening next? We're going to have medbeds coming out soon, but 2027, maybe as early as this year, we'll see. But by 2027, it'll look like 2028, super soldiers, everybody's going to be healed. And then by 2032, we'll have Return to Tartaria. Oh, wait. No, that's 2035. But 32 will be like a full 5D civilization, 35 Tartaria, and then it's gone. It's a long story. Okay. Have you ever received any assistance from Archangel Metatron or Michael?
No. But I did have an angelic thing one time, and that was interesting. I don't know what kind of angel it was. It was a comforting angel. That only happened once. Yeah. But I had confirmation with the other person that angel also visited them. But it felt like an angel. It wasn't an alien as far as I know. Yeah.
Cute. All right, Nancy. The universe consciousness is supporting Earth. We have a great future, but at this time we're struggling to get clear thousands of years of control. Thank you for that. And Francine, thank you so much for your comments, questions. We have Corey, James Rink in Australia, social services. They take kids from parents. Thank you, brother, for asking her. So that's something also that's going to have to change soon. All right. Oh gosh, more questions. Dishwasher to what is this? To the Pope, Swiss. Okay, I don't understand. Let's see here. Speech 1985. They gave Satanists rule the world and how they get away with it. Thank you, Christy, for that. Let's see here. Anyone else? Reporting parents to CPS seldom helps children, often routes them to the SRA. Tens of thousands of children disappear U.S. every year, never to be seen again. I mean, some people even describe being in some of these national parks, like a park ranger would describe a child is right there in front of them and they dematerialize. So they're being abducted, taken probably food, maybe. Okay, let's call it. Thank you, Eve, and everybody. If you want to learn more about the work I do, you can go to Super Soldier Talk and subscribe over there. I know I haven't been posting much. I've been working on building out these other websites. I've got a tour coming up in April. Oh, Eve just left. Okay. Well, I've got a tour coming up in April. It's called the Titans of Atlantis Tour. So we're going to go to El Paso. Oh, we're losing Eve. We're going to El Paso and we're going to see some Atlantean ruins in the desert. So I only have about, I think, like 8 or 9 spots for that. So if you really want to get into it, send me an email on one of my websites and I'll put you on the list. So we also, what more information is coming out of that soon. We also, if you like to donate to my nonprofit, you can go to healingsoulsurvivors.org. I'm going to Los Angeles in April to speak at the 5D events, and could always use a donation to help out because we don't get paid for that.
Yeah, something happened. I got cut off, and then you got cut off. So I don't hear what happened here.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gone for a bit.
Thank you. All right. And also, you can go to Neological Tech, get a copy of my book, Lone Wolf. I have some information here from Andy Perot from back in the day, but Eve, I don't know if I mentioned it. I might have actually mentioned you in my book. I don't know. But so it's 400 pages and packed full of all sorts of SSP stuff. So you can also buy yourself a meditation cube to help you relax if you prefer. And you can, I've got a new video coming up here. So everybody stay put. I've got a message from the Aeon patch from LifeWave. So I'm sure you're all going to love to hear about it. I love you all. I'm going to say most of you, all of you, I'll try to. And we'll see you all next time. I'll be back next week with great new shows and more information. See you all later. Bye, everyone. See ya. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the Aeon LifeWave patch, and we have Arthur Gross with us here today. So, Arthur, I've been hearing a lot about the Aeon patch lately. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Absolutely, James. The Aeon patch is a clinically proven product designed to improve cellular organ function and regulate the autonomic nervous system. Essentially, it's about supporting the body's ability to reduce inflammation and manage stress effectively.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. So, what does it exactly help with?
Well, the patch does quite a bit. It supports liver function, reduces adrenal fatigue, and helps with cognition and memory. It's also great for reducing strain and tension. Overall, it's about keeping your body in balance, physically and emotionally.
Wow, that's quite a list. So, you've mentioned stress reduction. How does it exactly help with that?
Wearing the Aeon patch for just 20 minutes has been shown to reduce stress significantly. In fact, it triggers an enhanced parasympathetic response, which is the part of your nervous system that helps you relax. This means it can help most people achieve reduced stress state with varying degrees of success.
Great. So, it's mainly for stress, or does it have other benefits too?
Stress is a big one, but also it enhances the body's dopamine production, which improves mood and motivation. Plus, it helps with heavy metal chelation and free radical absorption. So it's a great overall wellness tool.
Wow, that sounds pretty comprehensive. Now, How about the specifics? Like, how does it affect the body on a deeper level?
Good question. The Eon patch boosts several key chemicals in the body. It increases glutamate, which is crucial for GABA production, helping you stay calm. It also enhances L-DOPA for motivation, serine for stress reduction, and glutamine for immune health. And don't forget proline, which helps with calming the nervous system.
Wow, that sounds like a powerful combination. So, how would you recommend using it?
If you have a high stress or inflammation, I suggest starting with the Eon patch along with the X39 patch. For some, rotating it daily with other patches like carnosine and glutathione from the Y-Age trio can be beneficial.
Well, thank you, Arthur, for explaining everything. I will definitely look into it.
You're welcome, James.
Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.